All right, so since Sean Green was selected, Demaryius Thomas, RG3, Jason Witten, Mark Ingram, the Niners defense, Jeremy Maclin, Jonathan Stewart, the Steelers D, LeGarrette Blount, and Antonio Brown were selected. It's back to me. I am not super excited about the wide receivers here. I would have really liked to get Brown or Maclin, and I don't want to let that factor into my decision too much here, considering that, I mean, it's not that big of a drop-off down to guys like Pierre Garçon, Torrey Smith, Malcolm Floyd. But with that said, I think I would rather just add some running back depth at this point than my second wide receiver. I'm cutting it a little close with wide receivers, but having looked kind of down the rankings and lining up some players in my queue, I've noticed that there are a lot more wide receivers down the rankings I'd be glad to own as opposed to running backs. I do like Redmond here. I do like him more than D'Angelo Williams and Ben Tate, who ESPN has ranked higher. And that has more to do with the fact that it seems like Redmond has that starting job as opposed to Ben Tate playing behind Arian Foster, D'Angelo Williams playing behind Jonathan Stewart. I'm pretty sure with my next pick I will take a wide receiver. I'm not sure which one. I do like Garçon a bit. Torrey Smith. We'll see. Here goes Isaac Redmond. This guy at the turn has got to start thinking about running backs eventually, right? He took Peyton Hillis last round, but we'll see what happens here. Reggie Wayne is pretty far down the wide receiver rankings here. He's 106 overall on ESPN. I think I put him up against Torrey Smith in my last video, and it was close. Torrey Smith, by our staff rankings, slightly higher. Where does Denarius Moore and Malcolm Floyd fit into our rankings? Let's see. So we've got Torrey Smith, Reggie Wayne, Malcolm Floyd, Denarius Moore in that order. Personally, I have Smith at 26, Wayne at 30, Floyd at 29, and Moore at 33. So I do have Torrey Smith ranked higher. I'm not going to worry about the bye weeks, as I stated before. Victor Cruz is a bye in week 11, but I don't think that necessarily matters. Actually, none of these other guys have a bye in week 11. I could pick up another tight end here, but that seems really loose, considering I have Jimmy Graham, who I'm going to want to start every week, and the fact that I do want to start a running back in my flex spot means that taking a guy like Aaron Hernandez, while it would be a pretty awesome value at this point, doesn't really serve a purpose here because I wouldn't be starting him every week necessarily. Actually, let's see where Pierre Garçon fits into our wide receiver rankings. We've got Garçon way down here. Okay. I have him at 36 overall behind Denarius Moore and all those other guys. So, you know, I talked about taking Torrey Smith last time, and I think this will be a draft where I do take him. Yeah, I like this pick. Seems fine. I don't necessarily like it being my second wide receiver, but this is what happens when you spend a second round pick on a tight end. You pay for it at another position. So we're gonna make this pick, and I'll be back at the end of the round to recap who else was drafted. The guy at the turn drafting before me took Owen Daniels and Donald Brown, just for full disclosure. See you in a minute. All right, so after I took Torrey Smith, the next picks were David Wilson, C.J. Spiller, Ryan Williams, Ben Tate, Anquan Bolden, Matt Schaub, D'Angelo Williams, Malcolm Floyd, Aaron Hernandez, and the Jets defense special teams. Tony Gonzalez just went with the first pick of the 9th round. A lot of the guys I was looking at last round with my last pick are still available. Pierre Garçon, Denarius Moore, Toby Gerhart. Kenny Britt is on my radar at this point. Toby Gerhart was just selected, so he is out of the running for my next pick. I would like to add another running back or a wide receiver here. A wide receiver would probably be a little safer, considering I only have 2 on my roster so far, and I have 4 running backs for what at the most is 3 spots. I had the sound off at first and then back on, and I kind of forget that it makes a sound every time someone from your queue is selected, so I'm going to turn the sound back off. Feel free to provide some feedback as far as when I'm doing these videos. Do you want the sound on? Do you want the sound off? Does any of that matter? Or would you rather just see the picks and listen to me talk about why I'm making them? Cedric Benson is creeping up the rankings here. He was just signed by the Packers, and I don't know if that necessarily means that Cedric Benson is going to be highly involved in that offense, but that does make me a little worried about James Starks and what the Packers feel he's actually capable of over the full season. Who else is up here? There are a lot of quarterbacks still available. Roethlisberger, Cutler, Josh Freeman, Andy Dalton are kind of the top ones here. If I had known that, well, speaking of which, Roethlisberger was just picked, but if I had known that maybe some of these guys would still be available, I might not have taken Matt Ryan when I did, but I don't regret that pick yet. Like I said, I think that he is very close to kind of that top tier of quarterbacks. Him and Romo and Vic all are capable of becoming top 5, top 6 quarterbacks this year. I just don't think you can draft those guys alongside the Bradys and the Breezes who have proven that they can do it. But I do think that Matt Ryan has the capability of jumping that next level this year. Whether he passes those other guys in the rankings is, I don't know. We'll see. But I think he's got a shot. Rounding out the picks in this round after Schaub were D'Angelo Williams, Malcolm Floyd, Aaron Hernandez. I already went over these. The Jets defense, Tony Gonzalez, Toby Gerhart, Kenny Britt, Pierre Garçon, Reggie Wayne, Ben Roethlisberger, and Michael Bush. So a lot of I had to open my mouth, and just jinx whatever was going to happen to me. I've got 3 picks before I get on the board again, and Denarius Moore is still there. Santonio Holmes is here. I don't know how much I like Santonio Holmes. I like him personally, like the player. I do not like Mark Sanchez throwing to him. With that said, I got pretty excited in my last video to draft Randy Moss with Alex Smith throwing to him. So, I don't know. Maybe I'm being a little hypocritical in how I'm judging these players. While I was paused on recording, I kind of went deeper down into the rankings and put a bunch of players into the queue here. Some guys that I think are undervalued by the ESPN rankings mostly. Evan Royster, Isaiah Peed, Randall Cobb, Vincent Brown, Alshon Jeffrey, Jaquiz Rogers, and Rashad Jennings, and Michael LaSure are all really buried in the rankings. I understand that there are question marks around all these players, and that's probably why they're not being drafted or being ranked as highly as some of these other known players, like your Sidney Rices and your Cedric Bensons. But just the upside of these players after you fill out a starting lineup, like getting these guys as your backups on your bench, and just in case they do break out, is never a bad thing. Way down the rankings, Santana Moss, Danny Amendola, Austin Collie are all really deep in the wide receiver rankings, and I like all of those guys. Because of that, I'm much more inclined with these kind of mid-round picks, the round 9, 10, and 11, to go with running backs. Take the Kevin Smiths and the Doug Martins and the Isaac Redmonds a little earlier to reach for those guys, knowing that I'll be able to at least cobble together some wide receivers that I like in the later rounds. So after Roethlisberger was picked, Michael Bush, Justin Blackmon, Denarius Moore, and Fred Davis were all picked. That seems like really good value for Fred Davis. The action's on me now. And I don't really like a whole lot of these options at the top of the ESPN ranks. Santonio Holmes, Lance Moore, Michael Crabtree, Nate Washington, Jay Cutler, Shane Vereen, Cedric Benson, Felix Jones. So I'm thinking I'm going to jump on Kevin Smith here, although I do like Mike Williams, the Tampa Bay receiver, now that Vincent Jackson's there, kind of taking away some of the pressure on Mike Williams to get open and succeed. So maybe I could take him, and I know that Kevin Smith is ranked below Mike Williams, and I mean, Mike Williams is down here at the bottom of the, whatever this is, like top 30 players by ESPN rankings. So Kevin Smith isn't even like visible yet, so I'm not worried about him getting selected within the next 3 picks before I come back. With that said, I don't think I'd care if this guy took Mike Williams either, and just take a different wide receiver. But Yeah, I think this is still a pick I'm going to make. I'm going to take Williams and then take Kevin Smith with my next pick, assuming he's there. Sometimes you can really tempt fate by doing this, just assuming because Kevin Smith isn't visible in the list of players here that this guy at the turn isn't going to take him, especially when if you sort by running backs, Kevin Smith is what, like 8th or ninth from the top here. So if this guy knows he wants to draft a running back here and he sorts by running back, he's going to be able to see Kevin Smith. So it's possible I made a mistake in not picking him there. Admittedly, that knowing that I was okay if he took Mike Williams, I'll be a little upset if he takes Kevin Smith here because that's who I really want. His first pick at the turn here was Lance Moore, so we're halfway out of the woods, and then he took Jay Cutler. So I feel good about that. I think Kevin Smith is going to be my pick here. My other options at running back, Shane Vereen, Benson, Felix Jones, Daniel Thomas, James Starks, Bernard Scott, Pierre Thomas, Mike Tolbert. None of those guys excite me very much. I should at least think about taking a backup QB here, but I like guys like Carson Palmer and Jake Locker way down here enough to not worry about getting Josh Freeman or Alex Smith or Andy Dalton here, although Dalton being available is kind of surprising. I guess if all the other teams have quarterbacks already, then it's not a big deal. But let's see, any wide receivers I should consider here? Nope, I'm just going to take Kevin Smith, solidify my running back core, because as I stated, there are a lot of wide receivers later on that I would be happy to pick up. So I'll be back at the end of the round and recap some picks. So after I took Kevin Smith, the next picks were the Houston Texans defense, Santonio Holmes, Brandon Jacobs, Michael Crabtree, Brandon Pettigrew, Jacob Tamme, Nate Washington, Darius Hayward-Bay, David Akers, and Mason Crosby to round out the 10th round. We just started round 11. The top-ranked players by ESPN standards here are Shane Vereen, Cedric Benson, Felix Jones, Sidney Rice, Josh Freeman, Alex Smith, Andy Dalton. We've got a lot of drafters who are putting themselves on auto draft, and I'm not sure if they're just picking from a queue. We've got one drafter who is not present, the Miami Hopefuls. So he probably is just going to get the top ranked player available. Let's look at his team. Yeah, it looks like he was happy with getting... he must be a Packer fan. He's got Aaron Rodgers, Greg Jennings, Andrew Michael Finley. Yeah, we'll see who falls to us here. I'm definitely still just on the running back wide receiver train. I don't feel like Matt Ryan's been pretty safe. I don't feel like I need to back him up necessarily with a quality backup like Andy Dalton or Josh Freeman. Carson Palmer is creeping up the rankings too as a backup, along with Joe Flacco. I think I actually like Palmer the most out of all of those guys. I have a feeling the Raiders are going to be throwing a lot this season. But with all that said, I would like to get at least a couple more running backs here. I'm interested in adding Michael LaSure at some point, although he's so far down the rankings that I don't think I would take him here. Just to kind of, between him and Kevin Smith, hopefully lock up the Detroit backfield. I don't know if Javid Best is ever going to be able to stay healthy, although I guess you could say the same thing about Smith. LaSure's only problem is that he's going to miss games at the beginning of the season because of that suspension. I don't know. I got the guy I like the most out of that backfield, which is Kevin Smith. I feel like he's going to have the most immediate value, and if he can stay healthy, he'll, I think, maintain involvement in that backfield. Again, with all that said, I think if I'm going to take a running back with my next pick, I'll probably take Evan Royster or Isaiah Peed. If I want a wide receiver, I can look at Randy Moss, Brandon LaFell, Randall Cobb, Vincent Brown, Alshon Jeffrey, all in my queue. I'm not sure if I should just take one of the guys who is ranked a little more highly here, knowing that some of these other guys will fall. It kind of comes down to personal preference, and at this point, late in the draft, a 12-team league, I feel like I like my starting lineup as it stands now, kind of ignoring bye weeks. Doug Martin, Jimmy Graham, Torrey Smith, Victor Cruz, Ryan Matthews, Darren McFadden, Matt Ryan, with Isaac Redmond, Kevin Smith, and Mike Williams on the bench. I feel like that's a safe enough and solid enough core that I can gamble on upside of guys like Isaiah Peed, Randall Cobb, Vincent Brown, as opposed to drafting maybe what is considered a safer, more well-known player like Sidney Rice or a Felix Jones at running back. So since the beginning of the round, Titus Young, Michael Floyd, Mario Manningham, Shane Vereen, Andrew Luck, Jason Hansen, Cedric Benson, Felix Jones, and Sidney Rice were all drafted. There's one more pick here before I go. Randy Moss is at the top of my queue, and I would rather have him, I think, than all of these other players. Considering how far down the rankings a lot of these other guys I like are, I might just jump on a backup quarterback with my first pick of the 12th round, the second pick I have coming up here. And I'd probably take Palmer, although I'm going to check the rankings here and compare him to Andy Dalton, see how he stacks up in the rankings. So we've got Carson Palmer at 17th composite, Andy Dalton at 20th, and personally I have Palmer at 16 and Andy Dalton at 18. So, yeah, I think Palmer would definitely be my choice if I do, in fact, go with a quarterback with one of these next two picks. And again, I took Randy Moss in my last draft video, and I do think that it's possible he can put up a quality season again. I just don't know if it's worth spending a starting pick on necessarily. Josh Freeman was just selected as the guy picking before me ran out of time. So, yeah, I'm going to jump on Moss. I like enough of these wide receivers further down and running backs further down to make me think that I don't need to worry about that just yet. I could take Royster. How far down is he in the rankings? Let's look at running backs. Because I do think there's a good chance that Evan Royster gets that Redskins starting running back job and just rolls with it. But again, I think I'm probably stacked up enough at running back now to where I'd rather have a wide receiver with this pick. So I'm going to take Moss, and who knows, maybe Royster will make it back to me in the 13th round after a bunch of these auto picks go. You see all these little, I don't know what you want to call it, little gears in the top corner of these helmets? And each of those is an auto pick. And I'm not sure if these guys have a big queue lined up or what, but the fact of the matter is that I'm not too worried about them digging deep in the rankings if this is the kind of strategy they're going to employ. If they're going to set up a queue, they're probably taking players from the top of the rankings and jamming them at the top of the queue and not worrying about who's further down, like the Roysters, like the Peeds, like the Cobbs, and like the Vincent Browns, those types of players. So yeah, again, I think here I'm going to look at Carson Palmer, and after that, it'll be all upside picks for the rest of my draft. I've got 3 bench spots left, a defense and a kicker spot open as well. ESPN leagues require you to fill out a full roster, so with 2 of my picks, I'm definitely going to have to take a defense and a kicker, which kind of sucks this early in the draft season. Although after the draft, I suppose I could go and just drop the kicker that I picked up, or drop the kicker that I drafted to pick up another player, and then wait till the beginning of the season to kind of reevaluate and find a kicker and drop one of my bench guys. Still, I think if I go Carson Palmer here, I'll have 2 spots left for running backs and wide receivers on my bench, and there are 13 players in the queue here, all of which I'd be happy to kind of take a flyer on and throw onto the end of my bench. Whereas as far as quarterbacks go, I don't think there are many backup QBs I would rather have than Carson Palmer. The guy drafting at the turn took more quarterbacks. He took Alex Smith and Andy Dalton to go with his... Man, that's weird. Because he was the guy who had Eli Manning and another backup already. So maybe he's trying to just corner the market and do some trading so that he can get some running backs in season. I don't really care about that. I'm going to take Carson Palmer, and I'll be set at QB. And we'll be back at the end of the round to recap the round 12 picks.